Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of PostBurnout.com interviews, we talk with musicians and producers Matt Harris and Rocky O'Reilly about their new project Birthday Problem. Birthday Problem's debut album, The Language of War, was released in November and features guest appearances from Nerves, Woodburning Savages, Hawk, former male frontwoman Róisín Nic Ghearailt, Runah, Ailbhe Reddy, and Molly O'Mahony writing about the possibilities of what the future can bring. Matt and Rocky talked to us about the project, its inspiration from Berlin electro, working with each collaborator on their respective piece, the theme of the album, the trilogy of albums it is to be a part of, and much more.
Hi Aaron, how you doing?
How's it going, Matthew? How's everything been?
Yeah, not bad. I'm trying to think when we last spoke, probably about 9 months ago, something like that. It feels like forever ago, but
Time is meaningless.
Rocky, meet Aaron, Aaron, meet
Hi, how are
Rocky.
you? Nice to meet
Rocky, it's
you.
really nice to meet you. I've spoken to like other artists who've like worked with you, so it's nice to finally actually get
Brilliant.
to get to meet you. The first the question I was going to ask, I was going to start with perhaps the strongest question, then we'll all just go downhill from there. The first question was, your new project is called The Birthday Problem, and the Birthday Problem is, is a thing in probability that it says that if you get like a random group of people, two of them will most likely share a birthday. So my question was, do you guys share a birthday?
It's
We do not.
unfortunately it's not as clever as that. No. Yeah, that's we were kind of talking about names for a long time. I would say what 3 or 4 months we'd been working on tracks, and we were like, we need a name for this. And we thought we had it a couple of times, and we just wasn't quite there. I can't remember what was the one we nearly went with.
I I was just thinking about that. I had a stack of pints at Ireland Music Week and was texting you on the train on the way
Yeah,
home.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I was thinking about scanning back to it. There was one that at that moment I thought was perfect, and then the next morning I was like, no, probably not.
There was one, wasn't there, that I really liked the sound of, but it turned out that it was a form of epilepsy, and I was like, oh
Oh yes,
no,
that's right.
maybe we can't do that then. And it was like it wasn't this, but it was like something. It was something itch or the something about that, and I was like, that sounds great. And then when I looked it up, I was like, oh no, that's awful. We can't call it that. Because like for words, it kind of
Yeah,
worked, but yeah, for obviously offending everyone, that's not the goal of the project at all. So
yeah.
we gave that one a miss. But yeah, it was fun, and I think we just wanted something a bit sci-fi, a bit like we just went through a massive list of paradoxes, and I think this was the only one we roughly understood. So we sort of landed on that one, and that was it. But yeah, did take us a while to get there.
Do you kind of fancy like kind of cerebral concepts when it comes to naming your bands or naming your projects?
I mean, my main goal with everything is that everyone thinks I'm really clever. So this is kind of like, I don't know, sending me off in that direction somehow. But yeah, I to pretend it's kind of like the Monty Hall problem. I kind of get that it's a problem, but if anyone asks me to explain it or explain why it's a thing, I end up thinking, why is it a thing? That doesn't make any sense at all. And birthday problem is definitely like exactly that for me, where I'm like, there is no way that can possibly be a thing that
Yeah.
you get 30 people in the room and two people have the same birthday. No way. Just that's just a lie. So
Yeah.
I'm sure someone much cleverer than me has worked it out, but yeah, that's a paradox, right? It's meant to look weird. But yeah.
Unless you go to like a pub or something and like, two people are celebrating their birthday, then you're like, okay, I got
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably happening somewhere in the world, you know.
it. How did this kind of project kind of begin? Because I know you two have been like collaborating for a while, like with your varying projects. So I was wondering like how did this one kind of like start up?
So we've got two very different stories to that. Do you want to do yours, Rocky? I guess like that's probably a bit more closer to now than
Uh,
mine.
There's a Rashomon effect here.
well, yeah, the yeah, I don't know how long Matt's been sitting on it or thinking about it, but it's, for me, I think I maybe met Matt about 8 years ago. I just shot him a message when Hawk were in Ireland for a day and asked them to come up and hang out and just make some music. And then from there, we have done more and more and more and started doing other things, working together on Maria Kelly and a bunch of other stuff. And then I can't even remember when it was, but Matt just sort of in passing one day, just in here, said, "I've got these tracks. I've been sitting on them. I don't know if you were stuck on them or if you were maybe just needing a
I
bit of
was,
influence."
yeah, I definitely had reached a point with, I think maybe there was 4 or 5 at the time where I was like, it was kind of a COVID thing for me, like a pandemic thing that really started off in Berlin. This is pre-pandemic, where I got into some electronica out there. I was listening. We were in a bar. I think it was weird name of a bar. Like I think it was called Keith. It might still be
Okay.
there or something. It was a random kind of British name of some sort. And
Berlin always have places like that with those weird
exactly,
names.
yeah. And you always go in just to see what it's like. And they were playing like vinyl records, and one of them was "A Maze to Nowhere," which is an album by Lorne. And I remember turning to Chris, who was in Hawk at the time, and just saying, "This is really good. What's this?" And he went up and chatted to the DJ and came back and said, "It's this." So I immediately started listening to loads of that, and I was like, Imagine if this had a vocal on it. It would be kind of unique, a bit different, because it's all very instrumental, the Lawn stuff." And then I started listening to other bits and pieces, and yeah, I just thought, I can make weird noises like that, and it might be some fun to do that. So I started working on some instrumental bits in Berlin, and then in COVID, obviously there were loads of musicians that I bumped into or worked with, and everybody was looking for things to do. So I just sort of started firing out messages to people saying, "Would you fancy doing a vocal on this?" And I'd say 4 or 5 of them kind of progressed. And then I think I just lacked confidence with what it sounded like because it was different. And there were a few people I'd reached out to. Like, I think I reached out to a couple of hip hop artists, and one of them responded saying, "Wow, that wasn't what I was expecting." And it was an email, but I heard it as, "Wow, that wasn't what I was expecting." I just heard it bad, and it
Yeah.
just was chipping away at my confidence with the whole thing. So I think we'd started working on Maria's stuff, Rocky, at that point where I had like a similar kind of block of, was it quite as good as it could be? And I think that's one thing that Rocky's just really good at, is getting that extra, that most difficult 5 to 10% left out of the song, out of the project. And so I think we really needed that, but then it devolved or evolved, I should say, into starting from scratch on a lot of ideas as well. And that's, I think, where we've really found the soul of it and started enjoying it a lot more, is just the songs that, have kind of come to life in Rocky's room, full of a million of the best synths in the world, which is yeah, definitely not something I had access to in Berlin. So it's kind of made a massive difference.
Yeah, and I think that's it for me then. That's where it sort of jumps into my world. Is I love lots of German electronica music and always have. And so when Matt was mentioning that, and also just the thought of like kind of free, sort of a free chance for collaboration. I love doing what I do, but there's often a responsibility when you're, if you're like drafted in to mix a project or to do production. There's a defined end goal in that, whereas just coming in the morning and switching things on and seeing what happens, it just felt very open and without responsibility. So that was kind of where it really started happening. And then just the other part that I really love is collaboration. So
Yeah.
chatting to Matt and thinking, would this person do it? Would they be into it? And as we've drifted through lots of tracks, just meeting people I otherwise never would have got the chance to is the coolest part of it.
Yeah, Rocky, I actually want to ask you a little bit about kind of like, because you've worked with like, so many artists both domestically and internationally. Actually, one artist I want to give a shout out to that you worked with, who I think is very overlooked, is MC Lars. I think he's great,
Yeah.
but I feel like he never gets the attention that he deserves, in my opinion. But you've worked with like so many artists, and obviously you were in the band Oppenheimer, which is a very fortunate kind of name in terms of like longevity. Did you get any knockback off that actually
Uh,
when the film came out?
do you know, we got a lot more streams, so I think we probably got like 2-3 pounds more.
Oh,
But
nice.
but weirdly we did. I think it just sort of reignited us in a lot of people's minds. So like many people from the past popped up.
Yeah.
So people we just sort of come back into people's consciousness, which was nice. And nice that you mentioned MC Lars as well. I was just listening to him the other day.
Oh yeah,
I've
he's
got a
great. If anyone's ever listened to him, he's like really he's very like inventive with like just kind of like doing remixes of like like not even like songs that you would like really consider remixing and like just like really turning his own spin on it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, just very clever with words. Loads of fun. I
Yep.
did a couple of tours with him actually at one point when because I had another project called Malibu Shark Attack that was kind of right in his world, sort of indie rap. And we did
Yep.
we did a UK tour together, some Irish shows. Yeah, just really cool.
Well, my question was like, I mean, when like from working with all these artists, I mean, have you found that like your own kind of musical taste has expanded? And generally speaking, I mean, like, have you ever, and I'm not asking you to name names, but have you ever worked with an artist whose music you just didn't perhaps gel with? Not that it was bad or anything, just like it wasn't in your wheelhouse. And uh, but even like doing things like that, has that kind of like expanded your taste or your passion, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I think every project, that sounds like a cliche, but like genuinely every project I work on, well, maybe not everyone, but certainly all the ones I care to remember, people bring in things as far back as like one of the first records I think I ever worked on was a band called the Dudley Corporation from Dublin. I don't know if you know them. So kind of mid 2000s time, and when Dudley came up to record, he brought with him just like so many artists. People like there's a band called Thingy who are connected to Heavy Vegetable, and I think Rob Crow's in that band. They're a San Diego band, and all sort of around the Rocket from the Crypt world.
Oh yeah, I love Rock from the Crypt.
So like Dudley left me with maybe like 15 of my favorite new acts, including a lot of German electronica actually. And then from there, yeah, every project I do, I didn't even particularly like loud guitar music. Right at the start, I was in Oppenheimer, I was making indie pop, and then I worked with an act from Northern Ireland called In Case of Fire, who were like a very heavy hard rock band who got me into things like the Bronx and the Mars Volta. And at the start, that was, I didn't even enjoy the music. I was just like, that's a good snare drum, or this is an
Yeah.
interesting production angle. And then before I knew it, I was just totally like immersed in that world. So it kind of shot me there. And then similarly over to like really quiet acoustic artists, or even I've been doing like orchestral and opera recordings in the past couple of years, and that's kind of opened my mind up to other things. So I think I'm always really good at taking little parts of those and moving them into other avenues. So there's kind of like tons of like indie pop influence in some of the doom metal that I record, and then likewise there's some of those processes that come into folk music. So for me it's like that's my favorite thing. It's the reason I love being in the studio rather than being on the road all the time, is that you get to make like a million ideas per year instead of maybe just like 12 songs.
Sure. No, and that's what I was going to ask. I mean, like, obviously, I mean, with this record that we're going to be talking about, The Language of War, I mean, there's such a versatile range of like different artists on this. How did it kind of come, like, how'd you kind of decide on which acts you were going to reach out to collaborate with? And generally speaking, I mean, was the idea always going to be that was kind of going to be collaborative, or yeah, how did that kind of come about, I guess?
I think the ambition was always for it to be collaborative, um, in some way, shape, or form. I think the idea that you're going to find an artist, that wants to feature on every single track, like that was just impractical in itself. So
Yeah,
probably looks like it's messy and difficult to find someone to do, the individual songs and have someone different on every song. But actually, I think it's easier doing that because it's certainly more fun because you kind of, get a new sense of adventure every time you kind of start that process. And yeah, so I think it was always going to be collaborative, and I think the reasons and the ways that we've managed to get people involved has really changed a lot over the sort of year or two that certainly since Rocky and I have been working on it together. Like I think initially it was just people I happened to know or had bumped into or worked with on songs, or that Julie, obviously from Hawk, my partner, people that she knew well that I'd sort of looked over the fence at and thought it'd be fun to make something with that person. And then I think we got a little bit more adventurous as we started working together because obviously your network, Rocky, is different and bigger and full of people that I don't know. And then then we just threw the rule book out, I think, at one point, and just started asking people that we vibed with when we met them, like, do you want to make some music? And some of those have turned out to be like really, really interesting because it's people that haven't even made music before, you know. So I think like the first part of this, like volume one, as we're loosely calling it at the moment, I think that's going to involve a bit of everything, a bit of when we've kind of taken a shot, a punt, and asked someone that we don't know and they've said yes. When we've kind of leaned on our existing network and people that we know are going to do a good job on a track, and then people that literally are making music for the first time, but would be recognizable. Kind of don't want to spoil it because you'll probably find out
Sure.
about some of these over the next year, but there's some people that you'll probably know from a music environment, but not for making music. So it's kind of like giving someone the opportunity to be on the other side of the fence, and that's been super fun. And I had no idea how that would manifest, but you just get a sense of sometimes talking to people, you know, if this person used their voice for something else, I wonder what that would feel like. And yeah, it's been good fun doing that. But yeah, loads of different reasons that we've asked for people, and like we're always looking for ideas of new people because I think this is something that we see moving on and going on into the future. So yeah, we'll be thinking of batch two. Well, we are thinking of batch two now of folks that we can think about, and yeah, and find new reasons to mess around in the studio with them.
I got the impression when I was listening to the record that the collaborators that you guys are featuring were kind of and correct me if I'm wrong in this, but were kind of writing their own material and putting it to your music. Is that correct?
Been a bit of a mixture. So there's been some examples where there's been a complete song, like obviously, you know, with Julie being an exception to most rules in this situation, given how well I know her,
Sure.
there that was really the first track that I just wanted to try. So there was more pressure on, like, I didn't want it to be Hawk again. So
Sure.
I was like, I'll have a go at this. And that was very much me, like direct, well, lyrics were all there, the idea of the song was all there, and just sort of saying to her, can you please deliver it like this? And she was like, I'm not really sure how you want me to do this. And I'm like, just imagine you're a really cool German electronica artist. And so it just kind of, she found something else that we obviously wouldn't have been bringing to the table otherwise. But then there have been other examples where we've not even had a track and we've spoken to someone about what would you like to make if you had a blank canvas, what would be the cool influences or the less cool influences that you'd want to bring in to have a go. And then Rocky and I work on an instrumental, like a kind of a guide almost, and then they kind of do whatever they want, you know, in terms of melody, spoken word, whatever kind of comes out of there. But I think even if it is a you know, an established artist, what we've always been trying to encourage is to do something outside the box, something a bit different to what they'd normally do. So if it's a singer, we're like, maybe try spoken word. If it's, you know, if it's someone that's like doing really heavy music, really just dial it back and do something different. And so trying to kind of give everyone a chance to sort of find another side of themselves in the project as well has been, I think, something that we've been trying to encourage. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes someone's just amazing at something and it's like, let's just do that. So it's not always as creative and or, you know, alternative as that. But yeah, it's been a fun process figuring out how to make the right piece of music for the collaborator that we have in mind, because I think it's been a bit different every time.
Did the people you were talking to kind of seem receptive to the idea? I mean, you were kind of mentioned there, like working with Julie, but like, you know, and kind of like there was a certain level of uncertainty as to kind of like what you wanted. But for the other kind of collaborators you were working with, I mean, did they seem like receptive to what it was you were suggesting?
What do you think?
Well, I think so, but maybe you had different experiences. I think people are really on board with, you know, Matt had a really good concept of a lot of sort of scene and paintings of a lot of the songs, you know, kind of like where in time they were, how they were pointing. So those points of references, I think, you know, collaborators and writers really buzz off that. So, you know, if you kind of paint them a bit of a rough sketch, they can just start envisioning things and putting it together, and then from there bouncing back and forth. I think we had a couple of in the, you know, a couple of sessions here in the room together where the person's coming in going, I've got this kind of core thing and I think it's good. and then from there it just grows, or that was happening back and forth before they even got in the room. But for me, this is like, I feel like Matt is like the gears of this, and I'm just the fun on top. I'm just like, hey, let's like turn this up and do this and that. This person's really cool. Have you thought about this? And then so I get all the kind of the coolest part, like as Matt was saying, like that, like final 10-15%. I feel like a lot of the time, especially on the early tracks, where they were slightly formed before they came in, Matt had done all that sort of hard work, and then I
Yeah.
got the benefit of that. So, but I think as Matt said, like truly everyone's different, and there's been a couple of like incredible ones where like both like spoken word and word based, and then melodically, there's been a couple in the room recently that are just like so incredible, and while they're not miles away from what the artist is, it is like a new representation of them, I think, just because of what's happening musically with it. So I think for me it's like I sometimes find myself calling this project the birthday party, which is kind
Yeah.
of like my viewpoint of it is just like, yeah, let's just get in the room and like
I have to admit, I was afraid of accidentally
create
calling it
things.
that, like the Nick Cave thing.
So it's not just me. That's good. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe there probably have been a couple of artists having their back that just it hasn't come through. Like,
Yeah, I think like not for any kind of bad reason or whatever. Like I think there's been situations where I think the thing is most of the times I think the way I've approached it is if I see someone where I'm like, oh, they'd be amazing on track, I just immediately I'm like, they've got this thing. It's kind of and I've got like a small elevator pitch of like we're doing tracks about how would you imagine the future and would you be interested? And I think most people say yes to that. It's then there's two sides to that. There's finding a gap in their schedule, a motivation from their perspective to do it, and trying to kind of make it align to their universe. And then because we've got a little bit of a box that we want it to land in, it's sort of trying to create something that kind of gives the jumping off point that they get excited about. And I think stuff has kind of fallen a little bit dead. Like we have one song that I think Rocky and I would both say is finished and awesome, but the artist is like just not sure. So it's like obviously we won't put that out,
Sure.
but yet we're still working on convincing them that it is actually awesome. But it's just so different to what they've done that they're just nervous about it, and I totally respect that and understand it. And it's for us, we're just creating crazy music and there's no real rules to it for us. But if you're an individual artist putting your name on something and you have another project,
Yeah.
that's obviously a big step. And you don't want to, you know, one side of it is like you don't want someone to be like, what the hell are they doing that? And on the other side of it, if it blows up and people are like, love that song, wait, they do that? It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like it's that perfect sort of blend of trying to get that right. And I think one of the things that I sort of said to you at the start, Rocky, is I don't want to be precious about this. I don't want us to be stewing over like the last master and sending it back to 7, 8 times to fix that little bit of vocal reverb. It's like if it's done, and let's release it. But obviously, again, not every artist is on board with that sort of mentality of putting that a part of themselves out in the world. And I think, I'd love it if every artist got there eventually, because I think it's all just part of you and there's nothing to be ashamed of or scared of there. But that's a very idealistic viewpoint of the whole thing. And I think I'm lucky to have got there eventually. But I remember not feeling like that at all at different parts in my musical career. And obviously we're bumping into people right the way throughout their journey. So it's kind of I would say it's mostly and even if it doesn't work out, it's still been a positive experience, because we've managed to exchange views and connect and get someone's ideas down, and that's still a win in itself. But obviously I'd love for people to hear everything that we kind of touch, but I think the reality is that's just not always going to be possible in this project.
Before I talk about the record itself, I just want to ask two things kind of based on what you're saying there. I mean, the first thing, something you said, Rocky, where you were talking about how you kind of worked with the artists. I wasn't actually certain if they were like working in the studio with you or if things were being sent like remotely or anything. So was every act that's featured on the record, were they actually with you in Belfast, like recording this?
it's been a bit of a mixture. I can't think of the breakdown quite, but
Sure.
What do you think, Matt? Like 2/3 of people have been in the room, have they? Or
I think so. Like I get confused. This is awful, but I get confused as to when they're there and when we are working on things in the room. And that probably
okay.
makes me think that they're there a bit more than they have been, because I'd say it's probably like 80%, but it's definitely not that if you think about it, is it's probably more, like you say, 2/3, 50
Yeah,
50.
there's definitely a few people I haven't met.
Mm,
I've never met Molly. That's
that's
just been
true. Yeah.
all track, just coming out of the speakers. Some other ones, Paul Connolly from the Woodburn Savages. I just have big memories of him being in the room, and uh,
Yeah. That
that
came
was
together in the room big time, didn't it? I don't think we knew what that was until he was there.
yeah, yeah. So a real mixture, and but yeah, that's a funny thing you say, Matt. Actually, it feels like they've been in the room the whole time, or and often over a bunch of days, like spread across several months, where we work on the track. We go away and listen. We come back. We reshape the track around the vocal performance quite a lot of the time as well. So as Matt said, it's a sketch, and then it becomes a fully formed thing once the vocal, like how does that make us feel and what's the connection with that, so that can fool you into thinking that you're hanging out with these. But actually, that's a really worrying point of these people that I consider to be my friends now, and I've never actually spoken to them, and I'm not even sure if they know I exist. So
I think that's the
but
digital age, man. We all have
what
friends we've never actually met in real life.
I think that's one of the another cool thing about this project as well, though. It just sort of like it casts a net so wide. Like we are working on things from all over, and that's truly my favorite thing about music is connecting with people that you otherwise you wouldn't, and we're making something with them that then spreads even wider to more people. So that's the greatest part of all of this, of the collaboration and the fun party side that I talk about. That is definitely the coolest part. I think I'm always a fan of being in the room, nearly always, because then you're bouncing off each other and
Yep.
you're getting into it, and that's like sort of good connections forever. But there's something incredible about getting a vocal track just in your inbox. It's like all the decisions and the work has been done so instantly, it just feels like 10 times more exciting, because you're just like, that's your starting point. You're gone from there. So you're not kind of putting those together. I think sometimes, and it's just the nature of what this is. I think if you're involved in the recording of it, you definitely view it a different way than if you hear it just for the first time. But there's something more magical about the first time when all the work has been done. So I do like, but I love a chat and I love hanging out with people. But there's something really cool about just getting a finished vocal.
See, I was going to ask, was there actually any anxiety about that? Because, like, when you get a finished vocal like that, that you haven't had any kind of like hand in directly kind of directing or controlling. I mean, like, can that be anxiety inducing? Because then it's like, well, you have to kind of work with whatever it is you're given, or do you kind of just like give directions remotely then and kind of like, no, you need to do a new version of this, or, you know, like, for example, like, having to do like time codes and say, well, your enunciation on this particular part wasn't good, or how does that kind of like work? I mean, in terms of actually trying to direct people remotely as to what you want.
I think we argue over who's the most pedantic, but which is a really pedantic thing to argue about in itself. But I don't know, like we, so each artist is different, right? And how many times are we going to say this in this conversation? But I would say like Róisín, formerly of Male,
Yeah.
when she came round. Uh, so again, different circumstances there, where the the way Male was as a project when Róisín was in it is a lot of the things just she would go into a room and she would do her thing and everybody would capture what she was doing in terms of it was very much a live project. So the idea of tracking to a track for her was kind of unusual and different. And so and the idea of working with a vocalist that was at that point in their journey as well was unusual for me as an experience in terms of trying to kind of coach and encourage someone through that. And I think like with Róisín, she's just so charismatic and there's just so much kind of magic coming out of her all the time. Like I don't know if you've ever spoken to her, but she's one of the most engaging
I haven't
conversationalists.
spoken to her, but I've seen her live a bunch.
It's just, yeah, it's just I kind of leave every conversation and I'm like, she's awesome. Like, what the hell is going on there? That's just a good person. And working with her was a bit like that, and but at the same time a bit different and a bit unusual. So what we ended up with was a vocal that was quite different to work with compared to a lot of the other things that we've had before, where you're kind of moving things around a lot and you're cutting things up. And then what I would say we've done with every vocal is we've taken a lot of risks where we've been like, let's put it through this guitar pedal that is not designed for vocals at all. Let's try and find this robotic sci-fi electronica glitchy quality to it. And with Róisín, she was kind of happy with everything we did, but then there was one thing we did, and she was just like, "No, not that."
Okay.
So we just had to kind of pull it out and find an alternative. So I think it's give and take. And as you say, there is, I think we tried to ignore that maybe you shouldn't voice in your head and try and just like certainly I have tried to take risks and do things with artists that maybe they wouldn't do in their regular projects or their everyday kind of work. And so, and I think we've been clear in terms of communicating to them that we do want to take risks and we do want to do something different from the outset. So there's often been quite open-minded ideas to that, but I wouldn't say I haven't really had much anxiety about this. I think the secret third member of our band is therapy and mental health, because most of the times that we go into the studio, we spend probably the first hour or two just chatting about
Yeah.
stuff. And then by the end of that, it's like, okay, that's a good headspace to start making music because I've got all that baggage out of the way. And so I think that's kind of helped just, not have any kind of stuff coming through the door with you, which means that you're nervous for the wrong reasons. Like, I think that just enables you to take more risks. But I don't know, maybe you've been a bit more anxious about the whole thing than I have, Rocky. I don't know.
Absolutely not. I think there's a pretense for me that I'm not anxious or particular about things, but I think there was one
That's,
track I can't even
there was the
remember what it was.
mastering process, and you seem to be a bit more tweaky on that
Yeah,
than
yeah,
I
yeah.
was.
And there
Yeah.
was one mix that I did where I got to mix 7 or 8 or 9 or something, and you were like, "This isn't out until next year," and I'm like, "But I'm on it." But aside from, there was one track we did. I can't even remember what it is now. That I think there's something for me where I'll put loads of attention and detail on things, and then as soon as it's finished or it arrives at what it is, everything that we did to get to that point is forgotten about. Like there were things you mentioned there that I've forgotten. There was a track we did, I don't even know which one it was, where there was like something, there was a distorted vocal, there was something had clipped that someone had recorded, and I was like, I want to get this re-recorded. I don't even remember if we did or not, or if we just double distorted and made it something new. I think there's something to say about how talented and incredible these every single person is that we've worked with. So you kind of trust them. They're making the right choices. They're doing it's the right melodies, it's the right lyrics, it's the right mood. And as I said, there's something incredible about just receiving that fully formed. So, I only nitpick and like get obsessive when someone asks me to. So, the rest of the time, I don't listen to music and sort of microanalyze it or become annoyed by it or wish it was different. I'm really accepting and excited about music like that. So in those moments where someone sends you something, that's the view to take on it. Is this is a fully formed, breathing thing. How are we going to interact with it rather than can we change this? For the most part, I'm sure I've contradicted myself
I
somewhere
was
there.
I was gonna say when you said I'm not a nitpicky or analytical person, I was like,
Unless someone asks, that was my point. If you ask me to do that, like,
hmm,
all hell breaks loose. But it,
I don't know if I asked for mix nine, but but yeah,
you
maybe
well, you came to the studio 8 years ago, and
I
that was
did.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One
Yeah.
conversation.
Unspoken questions,
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah.
One final thing I want to ask before we actually talk about the record was a little bit about the logistics of the project. So, I mean, obviously, both of you guys have like, a million different things going on. I mean, obviously, Matt, you play in Hawk and you play in different projects and additional like with Vita Music and that side of things too. Rocky, I mean, like you're very in demand as a producer. So how did it kind of like come about in terms of actually like being able to set aside time that worked for both of you guys to actually kind of work on this project?
Probably a bit different for both of us, but for me, it's just prioritization. Like I've wanted to do something like this for I don't know how long, like 10, 15 years. So I probably should have prioritized it higher earlier. But I think just not
Mhm.
having that light at the end of the tunnel of this is how we're going to finish the tracks just meant it always, took a little bit of a back seat. So I don't know, like I think both we kind of spoke about this at the start, so forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, Rocky, and feel free to, immediately disagree with all of this. But I think one of the frustrating things about producing music is you can often get to the end of that and then you've produced this amazing thing and then the artist isn't ready to release it, doesn't know how to release it, sits on that piece of music for too long, and maybe it just doesn't see the light of day, or it doesn't see the light of day in the way the artist wants it to or the way that you want it to. And one of the advantages of having done the Vita thing is we kind of know how to do that stuff. We know how to release it reasonably well, give it a good chance of kind of, making an impression. And so a lot of the things that people would be nervous about releasing music just aren't really there for me with this project. And obviously, when Rocky and I started working on things, I knew it was going to be good. So the end goal that helps me to prioritize it, that helps me to justify finding the time for it, is I do want to release music as often as I can, good music as often as I can, as well as I can. And this is just an avenue to do that. And so it's kind of easy to find the time when you start thinking about it in that terms, or in those terms. And so yeah, I think maybe we're coming at it from different places, but it felt like that was something that we kind of connected on, the idea of just releasing music and just putting things out in the world. Because I don't know, the amount of times I've been sat on a track and when I finished it, I'm like, this is amazing. And then a year later, I'm like, oh, why did I think that was good? And so getting something out at the point that you think it's amazing is just a really enjoyable experience. Whereas I know there's albums I've worked on where I look at tracks as the album is coming out and everyone's like, oh, I love that song. And I'm like, yeah, I remember 38 vocal takes for that backing vocal. I don't love it anymore. And it's like, yeah, it sort of becomes, you get sort of wrapped up in the process, but this process is so quick that you don't have an opportunity really, or I don't have an opportunity to start falling out of love with it before it kind of reaches other people's ears, which is a really good experience, I think, for me personally, and makes it easy to prioritize.
Yeah, I think for me it's just that's just proof of how I feel about it. Is I've done other lots of projects, obviously, as a producer or mixer that maybe don't come out, but also collaborative projects where the other person gets so anxious that it doesn't get released. And for me, I just don't have that. It's like if the mix gets bounced and I like it, that's it. I'm not going to change my mind about it ever again. It's so I can look back on music from 10 years ago and still love it, or music this week and love it. So for me, it's about that. It's about getting music out there and actually just doing it. And for me as well, I think the actual process of being in a room together, exploring songs and sonics, that's the best part for me. So it's like every month, it's easy to dot out days that you want to do that, because for me, they're they're just totally free from, because we're not saying we need to leave with this at the end of the day. They're totally free from responsibility. So they're they're like a kind of they're like a nice walk or a swim or a day off. It's a chance to kind of recharge and refresh and actually just like sort of dance around a load of sonic ideas as well. So it's so easy it feels like a bit of a joy to look at your next 2 months and map out those days and go, I know on this day that's what we're doing. So it's a nice kind of dedication to kind of looking after yourself as well.
Actually, that was something I was going to ask. I mean, are your schedules like laid out well in advance, or do you get like a lot of last minute requests? And generally speaking, do you kind of like, are you good at being able to say no to certain things if it's not convenient for you at a given time?
I'm great at saying no, that's for sure. But I think we have different schedules, right? Because you're full-time music Rocky all the time, and obviously I have a day job, which means that I suppose there's positives in that, which is that I do pick and choose the music I work on, and I don't have to say yes to pay a bill to any music. There's always going to be that connection there, that desire to do that thing, and that means that I have a really positive connection with every project that I've been involved in, from a sort of production, performance, whatever kind of standpoint that is, because we're going out and looking for things that we want to do. and that we want to be involved in, and we're asking to be involved. So it's often the other way round, where I'm asking an artist, look, can I help? And then that sort of kind of goes that way. Whereas Rocky, again, I don't really, maybe I don't want to know what it's like being on the other side of that, and I know obviously you do pick and choose to a certain extent, or I hope that you
Yeah.
chose
Yeah.
to work with me on this, but
Uh,
I don't know, but yeah.
yeah, I think for me, we do tend to work quite, everything's quite organized in both of our lives. You know, we're very good at being organized. I think I definitely say yes to everything, always. So I have a real issue with ever saying no, because you know,
Sure.
a lot of the time if someone, you know, if someone's come to me and they've asked me to do something, there has to be a, you would hope, like logical thought process behind that, where it's like I've got something to bring to it. So I think I can bring something to a project, I'll say yes to it. And maybe the one thing I'm getting better at is just scheduling that time. So instead of, although I say that, it's Friday, you know, I have another 4 hours tonight on something, because and that, I guess that's a tricky part for me, is I'm in the middle of a project at the moment, and no one involved in the project is asking me to do what I'm doing today, but I can't go to sleep tonight without it being done, because I know it's
Yeah.
going to be better. And I've sent them the first sort of batches of changes I've made today, and everybody's really excited. So I think that's my problem, is if until something's the way I think it should be, I can't stop. I'm relentless. And that's the only kind of problems that I run into sometimes are, but yet that's something that I try to say to Matt, you know, oh, we're not going to do this on this project and we're going to be totally free. But weirdly, he's the one who's making me stick to that sometimes. So it's I don't know. I'm just like 24 hours a day, I'm just thinking about music. So for me, there's no issues with any of it. If someone asks me to um work on a project, I'll do everything I can to do it. But I think for the birthday problem, it's just about dedicating, like, you know, 2 to 4 days a month where we're thinking about it and we're on it. And that just keeps it. And also I think the releasing of the music really helps with that, because we can't stop, which is a really good motivator, you know.
I think like yeah, just clarifying, because when you were talking there, I was like, yeah, maybe I don't say no, and I, and not it's not like just a flat out no, I don't want to help. Like if someone, like the amount of emails I've responded to at Vita, which is someone saying, can you release my record? And it's like, I don't think that's the question that you really want to be asking. Like, let's get on a call and talk about what the next steps are. Do you know what a record label really does? Sometimes it's like that level of basic of where you want to help. So I'm always happy to help, but often I'll like there'll be people that might ask me to work on a piece of music, and I'm like, I mean, I'll do it if it's like this. And I know that if it's like this is contentious and it's maybe not gonna kind of get that way. And that would be things like I'm not the right guy to just track a vocal. I don't have a studio space to do it to a high enough quality. There are a million other people in Ireland that will do a better job of that than I will. Maybe not a million, but there's definitely a lot. Um, and so I just wouldn't say yes to something where I just, as you said, Rocky, it's not me. It's not where I can bring my strengths and the things that I think I'm good at to the party. So if someone said, would you track a vocal? I'd be like, sure, if we can work on the track together, yes, I'll track the vocal. But if it's just about the vocal, then that's just not me. Like I know you were saying you're doing vocal edits today, Rocky. I can't imagine a worse day than spending a day editing vocals and doing that sort of stuff. That just doesn't that's not the fun thing for me. I would do that to get to another result, which it sounds like you're actually saying. So maybe we are the same, but
We're similar. We're frighteningly similar. I think that's the
yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
I'll try and take up too much of your time then. So I just want to actually talk about the record then. So it's Language of War. And I was wondering, well, I guess the first question I was going to ask was how long was the production timeline of this album?
So the key thing is that that isn't the finished album that you've got there. So
Okay.
this is basically like, what are we, 8 tracks in, 9 tracks in at this stage? I can't even remember. And there's still a few more to come. So like the full body of work. And Aaron, because you're our special friend, will get you a draft version of that, because there's still a
Thank
few
you.
tweaks that we're working on as soon as we've got it. But we imagine like the full body of work will come to a conclusion in probably like March, April of next year, because there's probably, I'd say, 3 more tracks that we've got where they are part of this batch, this kind of concept. So the production time for each track, I'd say there's pre-production of like what is it, which is usually a couple of conversations. There's the sort of draft process, which is maybe, another session or so of coming up with ideas, then the back and forth. And then I'd say it starts getting really interesting when we get in the room together and we start turning on the real synths and we've got the vocal one way or the other, either the person coming in the room or not. And so that it can be like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days per track that we sort of end up spending on it, but it's maybe not like 24 hours of that day or 12 hours of that day. It's like just little snippets where you're kind of, I think it's just, as you say, that logistical element of when are we going to be able to have that conversation can make it lag a little bit. So I think that's why it's had to be ongoing, because we were never going to get quickly to a point. Like if we waited for all 12 tracks of volume 1 to be done, we probably would have been sat on the early tracks for, I don't know, 2 years or something like that. So it's I'm kind of forgetting what you asked, but I think I did ask it in that,
I'm
or
just
You
answering
answer
one
it
of
did.
the
in there
productions.
somewhere.
Yeah, you
Um,
absolutely did.
yeah,
It's yeah, they can be like, and also it can be some days we can be really focused on one thing, and or there can be a little idea that just creeps out of that then becomes a new track. So they sort of overlap at times, but I think they are all quite clear individual pictures as well. It is very track focused,
yeah.
which I
I have
really
like an
enjoy as
ex
well.
we have like an Excel, or I have an Excel sheet in my mind of where are the tracks at in terms of what steps need to happen. And I think like when we don't have enough, like if we've got a day coming up and I'm like, what are we going to work on here? When we start getting to the point that we're just finalizing tracks, I'm like, right, we need something else to get our teeth into. And that's when we'll start the process of thinking of other collaborators, of other people that we could do songs with. And there's just so many like early stages through to the mid stages through to actually working on the music that you just kind of have to keep the wheels turning on all of that all the time. So I guess from end to end, it's a lot, but definitely worth it.
And one other thing I was going to ask just about the record was, what did it start off with any kind of like thematic concept that you were going through, or in terms of trying to, I guess, kind of create a connective tissue between all these different collaborations, or was it kind of more a sense of like when everything was kind of put together, you noticed some kind of through line, you noticed some continuity between the songs? How did that kind of like work?
Yeah, it's a good question, and probably honestly, for the first time, I can say that we had the theme from the get-go. So
Yeah.
I was, I think, where would I have been the first time that we started thinking about this? Like, I was playing Fallout 4, so it was a long time ago, and Fallout 4 is just a massively dystopian kind of experience,
Yeah.
but with a sense of humor and just a bit of fun kind of thrown in there. And I've always been a bit of a sci-fi nerd, and so I just kind of liked the idea of the songs. And if I listen to Lawn, it just takes me into outer space. It has a sort of, I don't know, like a sci-fi quality to it. It just makes me think of like the soundtrack to like 2010 or something, which is the sequel to 2001 that no one really likes as much as 2001. But the soundtrack has some really fun
It's a
synths.
hard act to follow.
Yeah, different movies. Like I
Yeah, sure.
just, good for different reasons. But the what was I saying? The point I was making was that the theme I liked was the idea that it's the future, and imagine if we're continuing to just indulge all the worst parts of humanity, and what do we think those worst parts are? And at the time in Berlin, Trump had just been elected, Brexit had just happened, and it was just like I felt like so much of that was motivated by listening to the sort of selfish parts of humanity, motivated by listening to what makes us different rather than what we've got in common, and just lots of like things that I don't know about anyone else at the time, and even probably more so now. I'm just noticing that a lot of people are motivated by those things, and it's like, right, well, if we don't do anything about them, where are we going to end up? And so that was the kind of question. It was kind of dystopian. It was kind of, you know, inherently like, it's obviously Rocky was saying birthday party and I say birthday problem, and I think that just sums our personalities up, is like just, looking at the dark side there. But I think what's been kind of interesting is we are sort of planning ahead for volume 2 now and starting to get ideas in the mix, and we're just flipping that on its head of like, what will the future look like if we listen to the best parts of ourselves? And so volume 1 is going to start in a kind of dark universe, and I still think there's some positivity in there. There's still kind of, raising conversations and discussions, and there's like a transition into that more positive universe in some of the songs for sure. Um, but it's going to be interesting to see, what happens when we get more into the volume 2 side of it, where it's a bit more like imagine a better future rather than imagine how bad it could get. So I don't know what volume 3 is going to get to, but we need to come up with a theme for that. Like, there's nowhere to go after you've done those two extremes. Like,
Well, we
imagine if
could
it stays the same. We can do like,
we'll have to go back in time on
yeah,
volume 3. We go back in time for some
do
reason.
songs about like teletext and stuff like that, like
I'm there.
technologies that you miss, that kind of thing. I don't know. But yeah, that was the theme for step 1. And I think what's been really interesting about that is we have tried to work with a diverse kind of lineup of different artists, and I think you see different themes and what people have brought to the table there, where some people have attacked it from a really personal perspective on like, human rights and things that they really
Yeah.
feel have impacted them. And obviously that's at times been really tough to listen to, because you're hearing someone's actual experiences of, you know, now, and a real genuine frightening concern about the future. And obviously that's tough but important to listen to. And then other people have approached it from more of a, I mean, we had like a track at one point about robots that wanted to dance but couldn't dance, and so some people have had more of a sense of humor about like, imagine if robots can't dance, and that's again a bit more light with all of that. But I think, when you're looking at topics from like AI through to, you know, geopolitical tensions, through to like war and the refugees, the consequences of all that, are really heavy and difficult. And so I think it will be good to move in a more positive direction with it moving forward. But I think it has been really interesting to see how, because we work with, as I say, a diverse group, and hearing people that are 20 odd years younger than me kind of get their ideas out has been like, holy shit, okay, that's interesting to hear that perspective on it. And then hearing people that have had totally different life experiences sort of think about that has been kind of really eye-opening. And I'd say there's probably been 2 or 3 times where I've been like unable to give feedback in the studio on vocal takes, because I'm just like, I don't even know, I don't even have words to deal with what has just happened there.
Yeah.
And that's been like
That's a very
really
important thing is to
powerful.
not sorry is kind of like when you're working with other artists to especially ones as you mentioned who have kind of like different life experiences than you, which is pretty much everyone has different
Yeah.
life experience, I guess. But like being nurturing of that while at the same time also being able to direct them, I imagine it is kind of a hard game to play.
It's technical versus like personal, right? Like, I think you can always help someone, or not help, but you can always encourage someone to find an even more powerful way, an even more impacting way of doing what they're doing. But sometimes it's just not necessary. Like, there's definitely been like one take wonders when we've just been like, it definitely isn't going to get better than that. And then we do another 3 takes and we're like, okay, I guess we were wrong. Like, this is even better. And as I say, like, there's been those kind of, like, I'm quite an emotional guy. It doesn't take much for me to start getting teary about stuff. And this project has really kind of, I think my cat opened the door to that part of me first and foremost. But this project has definitely kind of, found a layer of that where, like hearing, like, we've got a track coming out next year, which is hearing like a story told by someone who's kind of experienced a connection to the refugee scenario in the Middle East. And I defy anyone to listen to those words and be like, that didn't touch me at all. It's
Right.
like those are hard topics to listen to and not kind of, connect to them in some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, there's been lots of like really kind of impactful experiences like that. And I think that's something that we'll just keep looking for as we go through.
Yeah. Well, it can be quite difficult, I think, like when we're in the midst of like really horrible events. And I don't think there's ever been a time in history that's been good for humanity as a whole, let's say.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes it can feel quite frivolous if you're doing things that aren't trying to be impactful. It feels kind of
Yeah,
decadent or something where it's like, um, life is shit for so many people, but we're just kind of like making songs about, I don't know, uh, going out drinking or
robots on the
whatever.
moon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
not
it's
even.
it's weird and definitely like I remember years ago seeing is it Robin Pecknold? Is he the guy from Fleet Foxes? And
Mhm.
and he did like a solo album, and this is in the Pitchfork era. And the review was just a bit mean-spirited, and it was just like, why is Robin Pecknold relevant? And Robin himself gets in the comments below and he's like, yeah, it's a good question. And one that I struggled with throughout the whole album of like, how can I keep relevant at a point where all these things are happening in the world? And I thought it was really brave of that person to come out and kind of confront that. Obviously, I haven't fact checked that it actually was him, but I think it was. I think that was what the
I'll
story
do an editors
was
now.
was all about. But yeah, I think like it is definitely it's difficult and the weirdest thing about this project and I kind of was when I was chatting with Sheena about this before she obviously got in touch with you, she
Mhm.
was like, tell me about it. And I was like, do you know, the funniest thing is like some of these songs we talked about topics that we were scared that they might happen, and then they did. They happened like war did break out in exactly the way that we were
Yeah.
scared it would, or this thing did kind of emerge more so in in 3 or 4 months since we finished that piece of music. And people might listen to some of these things and think, right, that's about that. And a lot of the time it's not. It's just we know this about humanity. We know these things are possible, and that is kind of what the project is trying to draw attention to. Is like if you're, I don't know about everybody else, but I certainly feel like if I'm aware that I'm capable of something terrible, it makes it much easier for me to stop doing it. Like if
Yeah.
I know I keep interrupting someone and someone says, you keep interrupting that person, I'm like, do I? And I hate the idea of doing that. So I will work hard to stop. And I'm now worried that if we listen back through this entire podcast, I'll have interrupted you the whole time. But
No, I think I interrupted you more.
that's okay then. I'm fine with people interrupting me. But that's I guess my point I'm getting to there is like pointing out these things. You'd hope if it reaches a few thousand people that they're gonna, think about that in their day and their life. But again, that is a pretty daunting goal for any project to get someone to consider something on that scale. So yeah, it's been a bit weird.
I guess the final thing I'll wrap up with is actually just when we're talking about these songs, because like I do think good sci-fi kind of imagine the future and kind of a possibility, and but really I mean like really good sci-fi is actually kind of talking about the present, and it's kind of like talking about the ills of the present and the hopes for the future. One thing I was interested in there, you were kind of like talking about what would volume 3 be, and I do kind of like the idea of like our nostalgic laden culture kind of regressing to obsolete forms of technology, just as just because it's kitschy or whatever. So that,
I'm
maybe that's a possibility.
massively aware. I've got a mixing desk here from 1970 something behind me, so
I'm sorry, I didn't
just
mean to call anyone out.
look out. But I think yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot of conversations I've had in the studio recently about just that kind of return to simplicity from people way younger than me,
Yeah.
of just like kind of one straight path every day, and that's truly one of my favorite parts of this existence is you come in here and close the door and what the rest of the world isn't here. It's a very simplistic, like what is, and that thing you were talking about as well about the like big weighted subjects, but they're all personal observations of those, so for the better or worse, those little personal observations. And I think that's something that that could be volume 3. I think you've helped us unlock it there.
There you go. Yeah, I just want the credit. That's all. But there was one song in particular that I just wanted to highlight. It was Wood Burning Savage's contribution, which was "Great Divide," and you're talking about like how some of these topics that you discuss become even more relevant as it goes on. But even in like the short period of time, I mean, there's a line in there about cage fighting racists, which I think we all perhaps know who that's directed at. And but even that's like, you know, much more prescient now because like, you know, a certain court case happened, a civil case happened around that. So, you know, even in a short period of time, do you find that these songs that are on the record are kind of getting more prescient since they were recorded?
Do you know, I didn't even make that connection there until you just made it. Like that's kind of the the weird sort of thing about all of it is that it does just, yeah, it's just it's obviously kind of depressing to keep dwelling on it, but like we are capable of awful things. And
Yeah.
when you're sort of talking about the world at the moment and obviously the impact that internet social media has had, it sort of feels like it accelerates a lot of that. It does some good, of course, like
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's all awful, but certainly helping people connect where they don't have an identity is a double-edged sword. It's amazing that you can find your community on the internet and you can find people where maybe you do feel alone, and then you find someone that is like you, even if it's, you know, something identity based. Obviously that's way more important, but even if it's just someone that likes the same record that you like and you're like, wait, you like this too, there's
Yeah, totally.
awesome moments of like joy that come out of that. But at the same time, there's a whole universe where I don't think any humans really want to accept responsibility and the blame for things being difficult. And a lot of the time, it isn't the force that you think it is that's made that challenge happen in your life. And I've definitely been guilty of that, where I look over the fence and I'm like, this is happening for that reason. And of course, I don't understand it well enough to know what reason it's happening. And I think it's just easy to get someone to give you the answer that's easy on the internet now. And that is, I think, the thing that has accelerated dramatically throughout the process that I've been thinking about these songs, which has been admittedly a good few years, but that is the biggest thing that we kind of keep seeing. And with the track with Paul, it was in Berlin around the time that I was starting to think about these ideas. There was an artist called Joyner Lucas who did a track called I'm Not Racist, and it's one of the most powerful like videos that I'd seen at the time. I was just, and it's basically like someone in a Make America Great Again hat sat over the table from a black guy who is basically having a debate about why one of them is racist or not. And it's just an amazing piece of work. And so not not an easy task that we gave Paul was to sort of think about that in his environment, like what are those two sides of that divide? And again, he just did an amazing job of bringing it to a place that I never would have imagined bringing it to. And again, doing it in a way that he's never really done it before. Like he's never done spoken word like that, as far as he was telling us anyway. Maybe he's got a secret project that we need to encourage him to release, but I
Well,
don't know.
actually, since then, you know, he's had like poetry now. Like I don't even know what the term is for that. Like I don't know if it's been published as such, but it's been he wrote a poem and then the Ulster Orchestra scored the poem and then that was read over that. So he not that, you know, he had it in him. And you know, Paul's one of the most quick-witted, most observational people who probably should be running Northern Ireland at this point in terms of just, you know, his viewpoints, his morals, his ability to observe and narrow one sentence, you know, the one that
Yep.
you've mentioned or many others in there. He's phenomenal at it. And I think that's the, because, you know, I tend to view life in a much more escapist sort of way where I want to be in the bubble and I want to look at the positives of people and I want to have a great experience and I want to connect with people through music. But I think that you can also connect through a small, you know, a healthy amount of that rage, you know. So it's someone hearing that one line that you've mentioned or so many other ones and just connecting with it and going, yeah, this is the, like, it's the kind of strength or the fire that you need to just keep pushing back against stuff. And I think Paul in particular has just nailed that song, and it's local, and it's, you know, it's Northern Ireland or it's Belfast or it's Derry, but then
Hmm.
it's also global. You know, it's
Yeah.
he's like he's such a special talent at doing that. There's yeah, and just given him, you know, he obviously has the ability, and he knows he does. He's released records already, and he's got another one coming that does that to such a degree. But giving him the platform to go, this is that thing I was talking about earlier. This is the kind of general painting of the scene, and then how does he see it when he's sitting in it? So the collective ability for that to pull people together in the modern world is the really exciting thing. It's phenomenal that we can be a little part of that with him.
I hope as
Perfect.
well, like from Paul's perspective, that like having seen like some of the things that he's published and written and talked about like on socials would have been one of the key reasons that we asked him to do something like that, because I think we knew he was the right guy for the job, because or we hoped he was the right guy for the job. And yeah, I think you said it already, but he did such an amazing job with that piece of music, and like literally, it feels like all we really did was put it through a few guitar pedals and make it weirder. And obviously, he brought such good substance to that track, and yeah, glad that one connected with you, Aaron.
Perfect. Thanks very much for your time, guys. Is there
Thank
anything
you so
you would
much.
like to add before we wrap up or anything?
I don't think so. No, no live dates, no fun things like that. Like it's just a weird
It's the plan,
project.
like, do you plan on doing anything live, or is it just all studio?
So we've kind of been. I would have said no 6 months ago. And even like performing it live, I just don't think there's an easy practical way to do that. But we have been talking about maybe some kind of listening experience of some sort, and like one of the tracks we're working on, we're sort of exploring. We should probably talk about that actually, Rocky, because I've no idea where we left that. But
Oh yeah, good point.
um,
It's
we lost you to Donegal for the last 2 weeks,
yeah, it's
so
been it has been busy, but yeah, I think we both have ideas. I've got like a really good idea for the which is a bit of a blend of that. It's a bit of a blend between like it's half live performance, it's half experience.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, hopefully we can make that happen next year.
Would you feel comfortable playing to like a vocal track of the person's take, or would that just be like you'd run just do like original music if you were to do it live?
I think you can incorporate all that stuff. It depends what people are looking at.
Sure.
What I definitely don't imagine is like us two on a stage with
no.
people looking at us. Nobody needs to do that. But I think that it's almost like people are looking at something else,
Sure.
Yeah.
and there is music happening there. Which again, it's that sort of collaboration of art forms as well. It's about and being immersed in it. I've got the
Mm.
perfect thing, but I don't want to say it in case you two steal it or something.
What I
Okay.
what I should have done is shouted out Tara Mullen, who's been basically the actual third member of this project, because she has been responsible for all the visuals around. Like Julie designed the puppets, and obviously they were great as a way for us to kind of introduce the project to the world. But Tara has been doing every visual bit outside of that with very little direction. So I feel like if you look at the project visually, that actually doesn't have as much to do with me or with Rocky at all. That's all to do with sort of Tara's vision. And on top of that, Tara is Runah, who is featuring on one of the tracks as well. So she's probably been, I don't know, maybe more involved in this than she wants to be, but she's kind of central to kind of getting it to connect as well. So it's been if we were to do anything visual, then I'd imagine it would rely on someone like Tara kind of being like, yeah, why not? And I think I've loosely got a yes from her, and now it's recorded in a podcast. It's a definite yes. So well, we've got it
It's
down
on
in
the record.
evidence. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, actually, I do think you guys have a really great, very distinct logo that's like really easy to like replicate if you were just
So
like to draw and stuff like that.
that was John Rooney. If you know John Rooney, he is
There's
one
so
of the
many people to
most
credit.
he's one of the most amazing visual artists. He did a video for Hawk for a track of ours, which was called "If I Don't Tell You," where we painted Julie white and gave her white contact lenses, and he basically did like he's got this unique kind of collage style of making like visual art that people pay tons of money for. And as soon as this project kind of came into real existence and we had an idea that it was Birthday Problem, he was the immediate person where it was like, right, he'll get this, he'll be able to do it. And he makes great electronica music himself as well. So we were very lucky to get his input on that, because yeah, I agree. We've had probably more messages about the logo on Instagram than anything else, where it's like, do you make t-shirts? And it's like, do you listen to the music? And it's maybe we just need to become a t-shirt company. I don't know, but
It's a great logo. We'll take over the crest
yeah.
of Ralph Lauren. Okay, thanks. Thanks very much for your time, guys. I've really
Thanks so
enjoyed
Thank you,
much.
talking
Aaron.
to you. And,
Yeah.
yeah, best of luck with the full record when it comes out next year.
Cool,
Stay
cool.
tuned early for its quarter, we'll say.
Yeah, we'll get it over to you and see what you think.
Perfect. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, Aaron.
Thanks.
Take it easy.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.